Welcome, everybody. Good morning if you're here with us on the West Coast. We will be getting started with our LightFair post-game show conference recap webinar very shortly, in about 1 minute. So thank you for those that are coming in. Again, in about 1 minute, we're about to get started with our LightFair recap webinar. Again, thank you for those that are still coming in. In a few moments, we'll be getting started. So thank you for coming on by. All right, good day, everybody. One more time, thank you for coming in. My name is Armando Berdiel, Technical Development Supervisor for Lighting Design Lab. Today, we are going to be delivering our LightFair post-game show webinar from talking about the good highlights we saw from LightFair in Las Vegas this year. And I'm going to be joined by Britton and Rife from the Smart Building Center, alongside Shaun, Darragh, Lighting Design Lab as well. So we're going to go ahead and get us going. All right, and if you've followed our webinars, I got a little bit too far ahead there, but you'll notice you're all muted. However, at the bottom right-hand side of that GoToWebinar panel, you'll see a chat or questions panel. You may be able to engage with us, write questions, comments. So go ahead and use it to engage. After the webinar, there's going to be a 30-second to 1 minute at most survey. Let us know how we did, if it was useful, if you liked the information. Lastly, note that a recording of the webinar, as well as the handout of the slide deck, will be posted on lightingdesignlab.com and our YouTube channel. Always want to create awareness that, excuse me, Lighting Design Lab is part of Seattle City Light. We are a department of the utility and very happy to promote their energy efficiency lighting program goals. Moving ahead here. Liking to say that the Lighting Design Lab model takes a village. The idea that we're looking at here is, hey, we are trying to kill the toggle switch. We are trying to ensure that we're getting from legacy light sources to the more efficient LED light sources, and it takes the entire market gamut to work with us and make it happen. And the way we do that is by hosting in-person or virtual webinars, trainings, workshops. We used to have a physical location where we did a solid amount of demonstrations, technology evaluations, mock-ups, but fret not, we are on the look for another physical location. We can retake that model as well. We also develop a good amount of tools, resources, learning guides, and like today, we keep our ear close to the ground on conferences and industry occurrences and disseminate the information to our audiences. So right now, I want to introduce Britton and Rife with the Smart Building Center.
Thank you, Armando. And I would like to start out by thanking the Lighting Design Lab for hosting this webinar today and for inviting me to co-present here. I just wanted to start out with a little background on the Smart Building Center and our work and some of the resources we provide. The Smart Building Center is an innovation center, and it's located in Beacon Hill in the Pacific Tower in Seattle. And that picture there in the middle is our where our physical office space is located. We're on the first floor. We have a industry training room and conference room that can be utilized by industry members for meetings, trainings, other events. And so that if you visit our website there, that's at the bottom of the page, there's a reservation calendar if you are a local person or are traveling here and you'd like to book a meeting space. The Smart Building Center, the mission of the Smart Building Center is to accelerate the adoption and commercialization of smart buildings, technologies, and practices through education and demonstration. So we operate through these 3 pillars to deliver that mission. Under the education side, our main program is the National Building Operator Certification Program, which I'll touch on briefly here in a little bit. We also run an annual technical webinar series, and we have other educational content available on our YouTube channel. Under the demonstration side, we also have the diagnostic tool lending library that I'll touch on here in a little bit. And then I also wanted to call attention to our annual conference, which is called the Smart Buildings Exchange. And that's coming up August 22nd through 24th. And it's the first 2 days are fully virtual. And then the 3rd day, we're doing the final session in person in Seattle at the Pacific Tower. And then we're also live streaming that out to a remote audience. So I'll put the link for that event in the chat here in a little bit as well. Next slide. Oops, sorry, back one. Okay, so the National BOC program, or Building Operator Certification Program, is the leading training and certification program for building engineers and maintenance personnel across the country. And shown here are our core classes for our level 1 and level 2 training. We also have an entry-level fundamentals course for those who are new to the field or looking to establish a solid foundational understanding of energy efficiency and building systems. And I just wanted to highlight our courses related to lighting. We have the 1003 Efficient Lighting Fundamentals course in level 1, and Lighting Principles in our fundamentals course. And these cover topics like evaluation of lighting levels, quality and maintenance, lighting fixture and control technologies, common upgrades, retrofits and redesigns, and management strategies. So you can learn more at that link shown on the slide. And then next slide, please. We also have I mentioned the technical webinar series, but this is a link to where the webinar library lives on our website, and we have the topics shown there, specifically under lighting. And then we also have a full library of topics, including HVAC systems, smart building technologies, water efficiency, indoor environmental quality, and more. So you can check out the topics that we have available at that link there. And then finally, I wanted to highlight our diagnostic tool lending library on the next slide. So this is available at our physical office and at the Pacific Tower in Beacon Hill. And for anyone who works in a commercial or institutional building in Washington or Oregon, this might be a great resource for you to check out building diagnostic tools for free. You can pick them up at our office, or we can ship them to you. Shown here on the right side of the screen are some of the tools related to lighting that we have available in the tool lending library. We have data loggers, power meters, lighting loggers, infrared cameras, liquid and airflow measurement devices, and more. So you can check out the full inventory at the link shown there at the bottom. And then last, I wanted to just share my contact information in case anyone has questions or would like more information. Please feel free to reach out at any time. And now I will pass it back to Shaun and Armando.
Hi, Britton, thanks. Just 1 second while my computer decides to turn on my webcam. There we go. Hey, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Shaun Darragh, lighting specialist at the Lighting Design Lab. Let me go through a little bit. Armando and I are going to bounce back and forth during this talk with a number of different things that we saw, a number of different things that we thought were interesting. But let me just start off with the basics. So LightFair 2022, we were at the Las Vegas Convention Center in the new West Hall. So the West Hall building is, I believe it's been online for 2 years now. So it came on at a very auspicious time in the convention center lifespan, of course, you know, your favorite spiky virus and mine. So LightFair, those of you who are in the lighting industry will know, has had a challenging last few years, along with basically every other conference, Light and Building, all the others. So we had LightFair canceled in 2020, right? That was going to be in Las Vegas. Then we had a postponement. We had LightFair in New York last fall at Javits Center in late October, so it kind of felt a little strange. We're getting back into the swing of LightFair being in the spring every year. This year, of course, Las Vegas. Next year, it's going to be at Javits. So there's been a lot of interesting discussion about LightFair and the future of LightFair, based in part on the spiky virus, based in part on whether people were going to be willing to attend in the age of COVID or not, for good or ill. It turned out that while the show floor was significantly smaller than it typically was, it'd be a little bit bigger maybe than it was in New York. It turned out the attendance was actually surprisingly better than people were expecting. So I think the word that I'd heard was that everyone was going to consider it a success if 8,000 people attended. Last I heard, it was much more than 11,000. So I think that is a terrific response. Now, a couple of things I will point out, because I am a lighting and lighting controls guy. This is a new building. Really? The daylighting there, the entire lobby area is fully daylighted. Anybody see something wrong with those lights being on in a brand new building that's fully daylighted? We'll talk about some other issues with the actual facility in a little bit. So I'll give you a little bit of a sense of who was there on the show floor, right? So some of the big players were there, but I will say that, again, the show was really bolstered by a lot of the smaller, really nimble companies. Some of the folks who should have been there from a manufacturer standpoint really weren't, and shame on them. Hopefully they will come back next year, because uniformly the manufacturers that I talked to were thrilled with the participation that they got from the folks who were there. So hats off on that. Now, to kind of begin a little bit of this, LightFair, there's a 2-day institute before the actual conference. So in the past, that has been things like, for example, there was a daylighting institute that used to occur. Craig Bernicker teaches an intermediate 2-day lighting class. Kevin Hauser teaches a 1-day fundamentals class, and there are a few others that happened during that period. We're fortunate to be involved in that, presenting my 2-day hands-on network lighting control class. Looking through the list of folks here, some of you have actually been through this class, so you have a sense of it. But we were able to present it again hands-on. We had 2-day commitment from 28 students, and that's a pretty significant commitment for a conference, so hats off to them. We had lighting designers, contractors, rep sales, utility staff. It was really interesting to see versus New York. New York was a lot of utility folks, a lot of rep folks. There weren't as many designers or architects as there were on this class. So it's interesting that that sort of demographic is starting to come back again, and including our hands-on programming stuff. Armando, you want to talk a little bit about the hands-on programming?
Yes, Shaun, thank you. Favorite all-time part of the class in itself. In the way I see it, it demystifies that programming network lighting control systems, it's the most difficult thing in the world. No, if you know the fundamentals, you can program various different systems with barely any user interface training. So it was great. And we were able to have 3 programming rotations this time around. in the past, I thought it was going to be difficult, and it was not. In the past, we usually have 4 rotations and less students. This time we had more, but the class was so engaged that it was pretty seamless. So on the first rotation that we had the Crestron Zoom system, where again, you'll see the participants around their programming boards, and they'll be commissioning their own sequence of operations. And from Crestron, we had Luz Garcia and Frank Lepore facilitating for us. Met Frank for the first time this LightFair around, and Luz Garcia has been working with us for a very long time. She was the West Coast Regional Sales Manager for Crestron, now has changed positions, and very sad to see her leave our area, but we've been assured that we're going to be in very good hands, and very much wishing her the best of luck on her next adventure. We also had Matthew Inoue from Lutron Electronics facilitating our programming rotation. Interestingly enough, Lutron was not present on the exhibit floor this time around, so definitely thanking Matthew for his time with us on this programming rotation.
And third, there's some guy that somebody might recognize in the back there leaning over. We were not able to grab a participant, unfortunately, from Cooper Wavelengths, but we did want to make sure that we had at least 3 programming rotations. So Armando stepped up and participated in the programming sessions, teaching essentially the programming of the Cooper wavelength system. Now, again, as we kind of keep saying this to folks, we're not trying to promote anybody's lighting control systems, right? Each one of these systems has different capabilities, has different programming styles, and all these things. What we are trying to do is expose students to several different options, right? Out of the 8 different manufacturers that we frequently use to teach this class, to expose them to the idea that lighting controls are not difficult, the programming is not terribly complicated, and to try to remove whatever fear there might be with respect to the idea of lighting controls, really to cement the course concepts. So hats off to everybody who joined us and everybody who participated. That was wonderful. I will say that there was one other interesting bit here. This is a photograph of Armando in our room. And Armando is talking about 24-hour lighting circuits, right? So this is the idea that you would have a constantly energized light somewhere in the vain hope that this somehow promotes security or something. Who knows? This used to be very common, right? You used to see this all the time. In fact, the photograph, the astute observer might notice that that's on the screen there is a picture of me from the Spokane Public Library in 2000, probably 2. During a teaching trip that I took there. And it shows the exact same kind of thing that we're talking about, right? A 24-hour circuit in a beautifully daylighted area that can never turn off. Well, the question is, really? Look at the light fixture that's above the screen there. Let's zoom into it a little bit. We're in a building that has all modern LED gear. We're in a building that has a complete control system. We're in a building that has been operational for maybe 2 years, and it has a 24-hour circuit in a ballroom that literally cannot be turned off. This is not good design, people. When they opened it up, took away some of the dividers and made it into a bigger place, the astute observer will notice that, let's see, give me 1 second to give my spotlight. This is that same light fixture with a different orientation. And still, you'll notice off, 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 on. It's not possible to turn that off. Don't let this happen to you. All right, Armando, you want to talk about a little bit more about the control interface here?
For sure. And again, it's not necessarily our purpose to like, we're going to a Space for conference and we're going to rip on the host of our conference. No, but more so to highlight, hey, even on projects that are recent, there are opportunities to ensure that you follow best practices. And another example of that is the wall stations. The various conference and multipurpose rooms had digital control panels that can get you to a wall station to control the lighting. And big pet peeve of mine, and then something that the lighting designer has been working and researching for a good amount of the last few years, is the user interface for your lighting control systems. As a tenant, looking at a very high-end building and space, looking at a wall station that does not necessarily have purposeful engraving, you'll see the preset 1, preset 2, preset 3. It's not necessarily going to be very helpful for people that are looking to do different scenes or presentation environments in a space. And if you see that on the right-hand side, to dig a little bit deeper on the network lighting control, user interface, user experience topic, we've had a couple of research efforts on this, and we did a survey, a larger industry survey in 2019, developed a report in 2020 alongside a learning guide on wall stations. So if the topic that interests you, and it's a scope gray area to ensure that products get purposefully engraved, hey, take that accountability and make sure that we follow best practices and make these things happen.
So last word on this topic, bear in mind, folks, if you haven't taken the lighting controls class, go ahead and do it. If you don't have time for that and you would like fundamentals of lighting controls, go to our webpage, lightingdesignlab.com, go to the education tab, and you can find a 4-hour, broken into 2 sections, fundamentals of lighting controls recording that will give you a lot of this information and will hopefully serve to forestall some of these issues. Just remember, lighting controls are important. So that really affects the utility and the usefulness of that space, right? Not being able to turn off the lights to keep them from washing out the screen is a problem. So with that, Armando, why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of the other classes that were available this year?
Will do. Last thing I forgot to mention, if you do download the handout of these slides, the resources that I have on the blue boxes will have links to them, just to make it easier for you guys to pull them up. So yeah, as Shaun mentioned, there are 2 pre-conference days and 3 days of the conference. Looking to move it ahead here. Shaun, you mind moving to the next slide, please? Seems my controls aren't back yet. Thank you. Well, again, not very different from previous LightFair conferences, and even before the pandemic. Good amount of control, design, and simulation, modeling courses. The one thing that was interesting on the pre-conference that we definitely seen circadian rhythm, tunable white, and light and health topics. Interestingly, not as propagated this time around. See if I can get Shaun, if you don't mind advancing, I'm just going to call out next slides to move us along. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And again, similar courses when we started the conference, but there was one topic that started to get a lot more attention this time around, and it's something that made me happy. It's something that the industry is going towards, and it's that topic of sustainability. Shaun, can you go to the next slide, please, as well? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there were multiple talks on resilience, sustainability, where are the materials coming from, where are they going, how can we promote decarbonized manufacturing processes and these disposal processes. So it's a nice emerging topic in this conference that I appreciate that is getting more attention, alongside the latest and greatest on controls, integration, building automation, and design. Go to the next slide, please. You can go to the next slide, please, Shaun. Thank you. And Yeah, finally, hey, we did see some light and health programming going on. But yeah, very, very controls heavy. Network lighting controls have been dominating this conference for a good amount of the time now. And it's interesting in the sense that a lot of the conversation, a lot of the promotion, utilities are still heavily invested in providing incentive programs around controls, a good amount of education out there. And network lighting controls are still not as mainstreamly adopted in lighting projects as they could be. And there is still research and ongoing on the technology, ongoing on best practices. So the more that we continue providing education awareness on these topics, the more that we'll see them adopted. Next slide, please, Shaun. Bit of industry news. I believe last LightFair October, GE Current, a Daintree company, announced that they had an agreement to purchase Hubble lighting in all of their brands. And this time around, they announced a rebrand, GE Current and Hubble, combined with all of their subsidiaries and affiliate brands, formed Current on the right-hand side over there. And in order to do so, it was interesting. They had to drop the GE moniker on the name, as a Daintree company had to join that GE moniker. New world for them. So it should be interesting to see how they operate in the field. And we're seeing a good amount of these larger purchases as time goes by. I think a couple of years ago, we saw Signify purchase Cooper, and there have been other similar business moves in the industry. So interesting to see how these larger conglomerates operate in the market. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go over, Shaun and I did attend a good amount of seminars and workshops on the conference itself, and we are going to share some of the highlights of what we saw. I mentioned a little bit ago that propagation of sustainability topics and decarbonization, resilience. So an interesting topic or conversation that I saw was from a couple of speakers, Melissa Matz from Sladen Feinstein, John Pendar for Perkins and Will, Jane White, the Fine Light president, and Karen Jess Lindsay from Lindsay Lighting. They provided a very nice presentation on beyond energy efficiency. What does it mean to have sustainable lighting manufacturing processes? And the story dates back, I cut out the timeline, but the story dates back to 2012, where a small group of industry actors, designers got together and started making a request and letters of advocacy to manufacturers to be more transparent of what materials are being used in their product manufacturing processes, how are they being disposed of. And that evolves and iterated into a larger, they call a lighting advocacy letter, where some manufacturers have been adopting the practices that this letter asks for, requires. And indeed, a good amount of different manufacturers have gone about it to provide what they call those health product declarations or declare labels, the red list of whatever potentially harmful chemicals are in products. So that is great. That is being looked at more closely in the industry itself. If you want to look at more information on this specific topic, go to mindfulmaterials.com. You'll see that at the bottom left there. They have a letter that you can read and also sign if this topic is something that is important to you or your organization. And you'll see the partners and the manufacturers that have signed on to ensure that transparency. And there's a toolkit on that website that provides not only additional resources, but different avenues and pathways to how you can report where your materials are coming from and where are they going. Go on one more click, please, or next action. I wanted to call out the RAB lighting booth. In lieu of actually having a product and exhibit and trade show tabletop demonstrations, they had sustainability statement, I'll call their booth. They had a couple of blocks of ice hanging over those glass buckets with just water dripping as a representation of, hey, climate change and the dire situation that we are in if we do not take action now. They did have a couple of meeting rooms, not only to discuss their sustainability commitments and how they plan on being one of those manufacturers that are going to be reporting and ensuring that their processes become more sustainable as they go forward. But they also had a good amount of meeting rooms to also discuss their new products and software releases. Next slide, please. Another talk that I went to on this topic, again, just very happy that it's something that we're looking at. Even here with us at Seattle City Light, decarbonization, sustainability, big topics that we're seeing overall as a utility, and resilience being one of those key topics. So Nick Trzaza from IMEG and David Schiller from Lighting Solutions Development gave a talk about lighting product resilience, and pretty much broke down a new IES lighting practice document for pretty much lighting resilience. They made it very clear that it is not an emergency lighting practice document or for evacuation planning, but it is, or the way that they are defining resilience is the ability to prepare and plan for, absorb, and recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. You know, you're thinking the Texas chills of 2021 or the heat waves that we experienced in Seattle of over 110-degree weather last summer, which I really hope does not happen this time around. But again, these topics of resilience and sustainability becoming more prominent, and glad that they are taking over that conversation. Next slide, please. This one was very dear to my heart. The seminar and talk itself was ASHRAE 2019 code update, but it was presented and delivered wholly in Spanish by Abel Ramirez of Leviton, and just very happy that you see more diversity inclusion on these major conferences. So it was interesting. I've given and known more about lighting energy code, but hearing it in Spanish, my native tongue, was very interesting. And oh yeah, I definitely had to look up some translation from the technical terminology. On the right-hand side, you'll see it's like, hey, it's a inclusion, diversity, equity. It's an important topic. We really want to ensure that we not only manufacture or develop best practices with various mindsets and different diverse backgrounds, but also we ensure that we take care of those communities that have been historically underrepresented and left behind by technology advances. I appreciate the Department of Energy as they released a report in March 2022 on diversity, equity, and inclusion in lighting. They even mentioned the Lighting Design Lab model, and they're like, hey, they appreciate that we have that platform that we can bring the entire market together to discuss, learn, and grow. And lastly, I just remembered LightFair last October had 5 professionals of Latino descent in the room in a class. I think we only had 20 people or less in the class, and that made me very happy. So yeah, just excited for what's to come in terms of growth, inclusion. Next slide, please. Saw another seminar delivered by Nate Mitten with Kimco Realty Corp, Mary Mattson with Energy Engineering, and Ruth Taylor with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Again, as a program with the Next Generation Lighting Systems, NGLS. I know last year they gave a talk on luminaire level lighting controls indoors. This year they gave a talk about 6 installations on a living lab that encompassed about 58 luminaires, outdoor luminaires, and they were doing various occupancy tests as well as energy monitoring. And to an extent, they were looking to understand, hey, how the maintenance of wireless lighting controls for exteriors has significant challenges. With their 6 various manufacturers' installations, and you'll see the manufacturers on the left-hand side over there, they were testing the wireless control, communication, sensor presence detection, and over the course of 3 years, it's been at this point now. And the presentation was lengthy, but a couple of the things that I took from it was the implementation and programming was a little difficult. And if you see on the right-hand side, all systems had some type of issue with occupancy sensitivity detection at the bottom right there. So interesting to understand how these technologies, like, yes, they have matured. They are ready for prime time. They are pretty solid, but there are still opportunities to grow both technology and practices to ensure that the use cases and the correct use of what you need them for are actually achieved. Next slide, please. On the same conversation and topic, big note was made for the various and differing methodologies, ways, types that the manufacturers present information and report on information. Not only were their user interfaces very differently, one could, different user interfaces would have like a graphical representation of the exterior lot, and others would just be menu-based. The terminology would be very different. If you see on the top table there, more so just to show from the 4 systems that had energy reporting capabilities, how different their granularity, their terminology, or the way that they report information is. To an extent, when it comes to reporting, it is very important for maintenance and for that facility manager who's looking at, is my system actually saving energy? Is anything requiring any type of diagnostic or troubleshooting? Well, when it comes to reporting, one of the big things that Ruth Taylor and the others stressed was someone needs to care. Systems can get out of whack over time, and no one may know. Sure, like people just think you set it and forget it, where your default operations from like dusk to dawn, and but to an extent, users need easy access to information and troubleshooting. Whereas good practice would be to set up scheduled reports as part of commissioning, when you review that is your system working the way it's supposed to work, or how it expected to work, not just a set and forget. And to an extent, monitoring and reporting needs are different for the different types of users. There could be enterprise scale reports for less granular information, or a local scale report that may have for different types of audiences. But with all those different ways of tracking information and reporting it, terminology, it does create a larger potential for confusion, when even in a campus that has different systems and are calling the same concept different names, may create that confusion. And there are a couple of efforts going on to maybe solve or tackle that potential confusion. If you can go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So a couple of efforts when I'm talking about reporting standardization. I am working in a work group for the ANSI C137 for lighting system standards group, alongside Ruth Taylor herself that was giving that talk, and also working with Harold Jeffson and Michael Davidson from Synapse on a network lighting controls configuration report, where our effort is going to be ensuring that there is some type of standardization or templatization of how information is formatted, what information is being called. We're looking to point to a consistent lighting dictionary. Also working with Levin Knock, and he himself is working on the Design Lights Consortium on another reporting effort for energy monitoring reporting, how various different systems can be consistent on energy terminology and formatting. And that specific group with the Design Lights Consortium is actually a lot more advanced than the programming report that C137 does not try to do. But luckily, we are engaging together and ensuring that we're not reinventing the wheel. And the message there is, hey, collaborate to ensure that you can not recreate wheels, save time, and be more efficient. All right, thank you very much. Now Shaun's going to discuss some of the things that he himself saw in seminars.
Thanks, Armando. I do want to call out a couple of things just to give folks some additional information, in particular with respect to the wireless controls and in fact generic controls for exterior. There is a lot of work that's being done right now. Perry had asked a question. I hope that answers it for you, Perry. But the short answer is that a lot of the initial work that went into a lot of the outdoor codes and standards for things like occupancy sensors outdoor had been predicated on lighting controls by Echelon, among others. Some of those are no longer available. So there's a bit of research going on in the industry right now about best practices. Anybody who's interested in that, probably the two best places I could send you to would be Google PNNL, Ron Gibbons, Virginia Tech. The Pacific Northwest Labs, Ruth is working on a project with Virginia Tech with Ron Gibbons and his outdoor lighting lab area. So they're working on that. The other place you might look is Georgia Power, interestingly enough, has a lot of really good information about exterior lighting controls, particularly even for widely spaced poles, for example. So take a look at those places. Another thing I'm going to circle back to, Armando had mentioned the whole lighting and sustainability thing. And I don't know that I would characterize it as sustainability so much as I'd characterize it as materials. So, you know, sustainability is a big, broad topic, a big, broad word. But really what we're talking about and what's been really interesting from this conference was that there were 3, perhaps 4 talks about the materiality of lighting equipment, building systems equipment. And Armando had mentioned a group that goes back to 2012. It goes back a lot longer than that. Some of the things, red label materials, for example, if you're interested in some of those things, go ahead and take a look at 2 places. The Well Building Standard will have some information about that, but more importantly, go to the Living Futures, the Living Building Challenge folks. They'll have all that material about Red List, about Declare. And if you're interested in particular, one of the earlier and really cool books you might look at is something called Cradle to Cradle by Sim van der Rijn that will actually talk about how the waste from various manufacturing processes or the waste from the building stream can actually become the nutrients for future ecosystems, industrial ecosystems. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So to amplify on some of that stuff that Armando had mentioned with the FineLight talk, it was unfortunate that 3 of these talks were kind of scheduled at almost the same time. Armando went to the one from FineLight. I went and visited with former colleagues from Luma Lighting. Luma had put together a research paper on this very topic and was presenting some of that stuff. If you are interested in that, the link at the bottom there will bring you to their blog and you can take a look at their paper and some of their findings with respect to this topic. A little bit further in depth, PNNL, Gabe Arnold and Kate Hickox did a great presentation about decarbonization and life cycle of not lighting, but the lighting equipment, right? So starting to look at things, even going deeply enough into things like packaging and shipping, right? Manufacturing, packaging, shipping, raw material acquisition, all of these things. And it really does become this sort of circular loop. Now, a couple of interesting takeaways from that. One, of course, is that there's still very few manufacturers out there who are participating in Declare, right? When I did my offices in the Bullet Center, of course, is living building, and it's supposed to be red list material free to the extent practical and things like that. it's still very difficult to get information from manufacturers about some of these things, right? What kind of wire are you using? Or does it have polyvinyl chloride jacketing, right? That's a problem. You know, there are a variety of different materials there that we really want to try to get away from. Now, there are alternatives in almost all instances for lighting fixture equipment, except the electronics. Electronics is a little bit challenging in order to try to get away from some of these materials, and that's simply a fact. So if you are a lighting specifier or a lighting purchaser, encourage manufacturers to provide this information, to have this kind of information on file. It's not really that much more difficult than having things like the material safety data sheets, right? It's a separate step that manufacturers have to take, but they're not going to do it unless we go ahead and ask them to do it. So that's a key thing. Another thing, Armando had shown you some resources. This is another really good one, actually. So CIBSE is a British outfit, Chartered Institute of Building Engineers. I forget. I used to have an associate membership, but I don't remember anymore. But basically, they have put together this tool that you can go to, and you can actually do life cycle carbonization assessments of various different lighting equipment based on specific inputs. So if you are interested in that stuff, that's super cool. Now, one of the things that Armando had mentioned was that there was not as much of a focus on light and health from an educational standpoint this time as there has been in the past. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, because light and health is still pretty front and center with respect to the lighting industry. And we are thinking about that. So whether it's that in this really sort of compacted format, we didn't have as many class opportunities, or I'm going to guess, I'm not going to the national conference, the IS national conference this year, but I'm going to guess if I was going to that the usual suspects are probably going to be there going through the latest and greatest research into light and health and physiology. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But one really good presentation, Stantec folks put together, including Seattle Light, Allison Fiedler, presented on the latest well building standard, right? The version 2 well building standard. If you haven't encountered well building yet, think of it this way. LEED is all about the health of the building, about the space itself. Well is all about the health of the people that are residing within that building. So they're sort of complementary standards to pay attention to. All right, it's not to say that there wasn't a lot of light and health there. There certainly was. So our friends from BIOS were there talking about circadian entrainment, as they frequently are, and showing off some of their equipment. And there were others in various places. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go through, particularly in the last talk discussions. But that will give you sort of some sense of the thrust of some of the classes. You can look on the handout and you'll actually see the what classes there were. But this gives you a pretty good kind of overview of some of those things. Now, switching gears just a little bit, one of the key things at LightFair has always been the Innovation Awards, right? So this, not unlike the past, the 33rd year of annual Innovation Awards, you will notice that there is a Scan Me QR code, the ubiquitous QR code now. You can go ahead to that and scan it on your smart device, and it will bring you to a pretty slick little digital brochure that you can go through and see the details of a lot of this stuff. Or you can, of course, follow the URL that's listed here, Innovation Awards from lightfair.com. But as in the past, there are a number of different categories and a good number of various folks submitting their product. Here is a quick overview of some of that stuff. Now, it's broken down into I think it's 14 categories. and each one will have a winner. These are the winners within each one of those categories. We're not going to go through all of them, but we will mention a few of the particular products that caught our eye either on the floor or in discussions with manufacturers. Armando, why don't you take the first one with the technical award from McWong that we have here.
Will do. Thank you very much, Shaun, for that Technical Innovation Award. I actually was really excited about this technology. So McWong has a technology called the TrueBlue Bluetooth Mesh. It's a fixture controller with a long-range antenna, and they developed it in collaboration with their technology partner Silvair, and that Silvair's CTOs, you'll see him on the left-hand side there, Simon Slupik. And the idea is they offer for lighting control outdoors primarily, but their antenna gives you a range of 900 feet of Bluetooth mesh wireless controller that could be integrated directly into different commercial fixtures, eliminating what they call the range anxiety. And obviously the load controller will act as we expect, continuous dimming. It does have the DLC qualification, certification, can do individual addressability for luminaire level lighting control applications. And as you see, Simon says on the left-hand side there, oh, you can create about 20 miles of a mesh network. And that's very correct. Great potential for that technology for larger spaces. And it's funny, when they did the Innovation Award winning tour, Mark Roche, a past IES president, was leading the tour, but only 4 people joined the tour, me being one of the 4. And if you see me on that LinkedIn post of McWong International, I'm standing right there as they're having Mark Roche discuss their product to the tour. The 4 of us attended, but it was a great time, as Mark is a very comedic individual. Can you click one more? Can you go one more click, please, Shaun? And with these topics of, hey, Bluetooth, wireless communication, DALI, 0 to 10, there's a lot of discussion these days about just wireless communications, wireless protocols, how is it different from a load controller talking to a driver or a wall station talking to a load controller. So we have a resource on our resource page, obviously linked here if you download the handout. It's a 11 page guide on demystifying communication protocols. A very good one if you want to check it out. Shaun, you want to share with us some of the other products that got awards?
Yeah, I just want to highlight the idea when you're going to LightFair and you're doing some of these things, you get actually a really interesting opportunity sometimes to go ahead and interact with folks who are really pushing boundaries. Armando mentioned Simon here. Simon is actually one of the key people behind the Bluetooth SIG working group. So, not only is he working on a product and working on a product with McWong among others, but he's one of the primary innovators. So it's a really good opportunity to do things like that. The Design Excellence Award went to Edison Price. So Edison Price, those of you may know, is a longtime innovator in the lighting industry, a small company from New York that has traditionally been known for very high performance downlights and track heads, right? One of the things that they've developed is this idea called EasyLink, which is essentially a linked product where you can take modules and tie them together into a variety of shapes, into a variety of configurations, while still having very good performance lighting and low glare, very interesting kind of space. Armando, do you want to take the next one?
Sorry, I had trouble with the controls there. Yes, this next award was the Judges Citation Award, which basically means the judges can arbitrarily give an award to any product they deem worthy. And this year, Combi Cable from Gripple Inc. received that honor, and a pretty nifty product itself. It combines both suspension as well as the power and communications cabling into just one cable. Again, designed to eliminate the unsightly cable ties, better for aesthetic finishes. And I circle around the 5 conductors because you'll have power, neutral, ground, and 2 communication wires. And while we were doing the Innovation Awards tour, Mark Roush does ask the manufacturer, Gripple, so when is the 7 cable conductor coming out so we can do tunable white applications? And I saw the Gripple representatives there just looked at each other like, see us next year. So we'll hold them to it.
Great. So well, that certainly cleans up installations, particularly for a lot of indirect direct lighting throughout the area. The most innovative product of the year went to Cluse. So My4 is a kind of very interesting concept where essentially you sketch whatever you want, right? And they make it glow. So there are a couple of examples here from their booth on the left where they had just basically sketched up some shapes and turned them into light fixtures. On the right, you'll see really kind of free-form curves. These are not, maybe hard to tell from the image, but these are not just curved extrusions throughout the space. It actually is a little bit more involved than that. So that was an interesting product that was available from Cluse. Now, another interesting product. So Heavy Light, the 2 very long time industry folks, Joe Noel and John Baldasti, have come up with an interesting product here that they're calling the aileron track. And effectively, what this is a wet location, multiple head. It's not technically track lighting, but it's that kind of idea, so that you can tie modules together, you can have them suspended, and aim them, adjust them as necessary. This winds up being actually something that is potentially quite useful in projects. So good for them. Another award, innovation award, USAI, another high performance downlighting company that's been around for a good long time. We keep shrinking lighting, right? A few years ago, 10 years ago now, Prescolite came out with 2-inch aperture, I keep doing that, 2-inch aperture downlights that actually had some significant performance to them, which was a surprise, because being able to do a wall washer or an accent light from a 2-inch aperture was relatively difficult to do. USAI has gone ahead and pushed that forward. They have a variety of 1-inch aperture rounds and squares, wall washers, accent adjustables, and downlights. I think they go up to 1,000 lumens output from these things. Now, a quick caution. If you have an inaccessible ceiling, like a gyp ceiling, you're going to have to be able to get to these things from behind somehow. You're not going to be able to get through the aperture in order to get to the electronics and or the wiring makeup. So bear that in mind when you're doing stuff like that. But it is a good example of how the industry continues to evolve from what years ago we might have used 6-inch downlights, then to 4-inch downlights. Now in some cases we're at 1-inch downlights. Another product that I really liked, I've done a lot of outdoor pathway lighting and a lot of sort of campus lighting. And Wagner, so Wagner is a handrail company, right? That got into lighting for handrails some years ago, and in particular with a company called Click out of Australia. And they started doing things like illuminated handrail systems, much like IO does and others. This is an interesting sort of take on that, where they're acknowledging that, frankly, outdoor lighting at night in most cases is pretty overlighted and doesn't have to be as bright as it is. So they're taking the idea of handrail stanchions or bollards that are very similar, and they're putting relatively low light level light sources in them, LED light sources, of course, like everything else, and then offering you the ability to select either typical shielding, or you can go ahead and essentially draw your own, and if you've got enough of them, they'll do it for you, right? They'll do whatever shape you want on that particular bollard or handrail. So I thought that was actually pretty cool, and obviously so did the LightFair judges. So that's an interesting product to take a look at. Now, GUV, essentially ultraviolet disinfection, right? Upper air disinfection using ultraviolet light is something that has been around for many, many years. We've used UV ultraviolet systems to disinfect air and, for example, tuberculosis wards for a very long time. Of course, you know, something happened a couple of years ago that renewed general public interest in using ultraviolet light for disinfection purposes. I'm not sure what that was, but Pure Lighting has come up with this pendant, right? So it's basically a cylinder pendant downlight that also has upper air ultraviolet disinfection. So the idea is that this is not going to be the only solution that you might have in a disinfection kind of regimen, but in the general sense of things, it can't hurt, right? It certainly can help. So this is an integrated system from Pure Lighting. And the last one that I'm going to talk about here, which is kind of interesting, the LED is a wonderful light source, right? It does a lot of great things for us. One of the things it hasn't been phenomenal at is high performance tight beam spotlights. So anybody who travels in Seattle, go into the Pioneer Square station, you'll see a clock at either end on the bulkheads there in the station. Those clocks are supposed to be highlighted with tight beam spotlights from the perimeter. Somebody had a great idea to get rid of the halogen spotlights and replace them with LED. Well, the LEDs that they replace them with do nothing, right? They don't highlight anything. They're not tight beam enough in order to make that clock really visible, right? Frankly, all they're doing is wasting some energy at this point. LedSmart came up with this nice high intensity PAR, parabolic aluminized reflector, 56, so 56/8 of an inch in diameter. This was kind of a bulb shape that bridged between theater and architecture. So if you go into a lot of very high ceiling spaces, for example, at SeaTac Airport, there are high ceiling spaces like this, or the Washington State Convention Center that used PAR 64 or PAR 56 light sources. The ability to take an LED light source and push a lot of light out in a narrow beam is very useful. So this is also then, because of that, another award winner. So with all of that, Armando, why don't you come back and give us a quick overview of some of the facets of the show floor.
Thank you, Shaun, for sure. I'm going to repeat a little bit of something that Shaun mentioned at the very beginning. You'll see some of the usual suspects, but this year a lot of the large manufacturers were not in place, and you saw some of the smaller design and the other companies being highlighted with bigger booths this year. Can you go to the next slide, please, Shaun? And on the next slide, the first thing I'm going to say here is next. I took my own set of panoramic photos, and Shaun, they look nowhere near as good as yours. So very, very nice. But I appreciate the fact that the exhibitors are very logically grouped. You'll have the smarts pavilion or the design community, the components manufacturers, all together in a way that if you're looking for a specific type of topic, you'll find various companies, manufacturers grouped that way. Go on to the next slide, please, Shaun. Again, and then this next slide is going to be an example. Hey, it's sometimes a newer or smaller design firms getting larger booths, making quite a statement here. So appreciate them, and I'm assuming they're taking that opportunity. Hey, we're still getting back from pandemic, so they're looking to say, hey, we are going to be coming back and in full force. So now we're going to go over a couple of the products from us, Shaun and I, walking the floor, and a couple of the booths that we looked at. Go ahead, Shaun.
I'm going to jump in and just mention one of the key things here. So while a lot of the big companies, big conglomerates were either not there or were minimally there, one of the key things that you can get, particularly from going to LightFair and things like this, is looking at some of the decorative equipment that's there. It's a little bit hard to tell what a decorative light fixture from Oxygen or Blackjack or Bruck are going to do from a catalog, but when you see them in person, you know, we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I usually say a sample is worth 1,000,000. So.
Always, and very important whenever you're looking to implement a new lighting application, always recommend mock-up, test, hold it, you know, get the feel for it. So it's very much in tune with that. You go to the next slide, please, Shaun. Go over some of the highlights that both Shaun and I looked at, and we're like, this company, this product, this software, this service really caught our eye. And I'm going to start with a booth, a company called Utility Genius. They, to an extent, aggregate utility incentive programs into their software platform. And it was pretty nifty. They actually have, it's a free platform where they even mention, hey, do you want on your website, do you want a widget of the incentive programs in your utility? So when I looked at their site, sure, I was at their booth, but when I came back, I looked at their site, and you know, Washington, I clicked on Seattle City Light. And if you can click one more slide, please, Shaun. You know, you can able to drill down for a utility, look at the lighting, or any controls incentives, HVAC, building automation, electric vehicle. So it was great, and I appreciate it in the sense that sometimes it may be difficult depending on the utilities that you're working with to find their workbook or their incentive program. And I usually just have pages bookmarked and send out links, but the ability to have a very solid user interface that you can find incentive program, I thought it was pretty worthwhile thing. So I wanted to highlight them here. Next slide, please. This is a bollard called the Pavilion Bollard by Kim Lighting, one of the now current brands. Stood out for me, like, sure, it's you know, RGBW, a good amount of top combinations, but I highlighted because a couple of years ago in our utility division, we were looking at piloting food truck pedestal chargers, and we were looking for various products to pilot, and then ended up on one that was just a pedestal that was able to have the connections to power food trucks, rather than, and the idea is to, rather than having a park buzzing with all the diesel generators, have an electric solution that's cleaner and quieter. This product combines both the lighting part and can have the different receptacles for, sure, like 120 volts or 208 or whatever type of voltage you may need for different applications, including food truck charging. So I thought it was a great product, and if we're still looking at those pilots, we can check them out. Next slide, please. So this is a software product by a company called Eco Insight, and interestingly enough, in a previous role, I would do a good amount of building lighting audits, and I used a software called SnapCount, and Eco Insight is another brand of building auditing software where you go through an entire building, take images, and be able to select products and wattage to make the calculations all the way through a proposal. And what I liked about Eco Insight, it's slightly different than SnapCount, is they allow you to have a floor plan view of your building audit, where if you have, you know, multiple room types that are similar, say, you know, a private office that has the same type of gear, you can just simply copy paste, and that saves so much time and effort when you're doing a building audit. So I appreciated that floor plan feature on Eco Insight. Next slide, please, Shaun. So here I have some images of the Cooper wavelengths system, but I'm going to make this specific call out not just about Cooper, various other manufacturers, and I'm thinking of Signify's Interact system and Lutron's Vive system have a similar way you can implement them. And just looking at the Starbucks, Tall, Grande, or Venti, and that is the ability to implement controls on lighting projects. It's still not necessarily the most mainstream thought process to add controls to lighting projects. So manufacturers are going about it in ways that can be easily accessible, or introducing controls in a project in a more cost effective way. And I'll use the Cooper example here. I didn't take a picture of the, if you see at the very bottom right hand side of the right picture, it says wavelengths light. And that's the ability to start implementing controls without a gateway, and it's basically the ancillary, your wall stations, your sensors, assuming you'll have fixtures with integrated load controllers, but you'll be able to control that control system with your phone. And then if you, and it's again very cost effective, but let's say you want additional features, connectivity, tying multiple floors or a building together, then you would implement what's called that wavelengths wireless system. That's your mid-scale scalable system that will have a gateway. You can have a bit more interface applications and features. And then if you want to go like into the Starbucks metaphor, the Venti, or adding the smarts infrastructure to your system, Cooper has what they call their Trellix platform, and you can then have some of those non-energy benefits such as asset tracking or space utilization, integrating with a building automation control system. And again, what we like is that, hey, if you don't actually have the capital for the upfront cost for the Venti, the smart system in the outset, have the light or the lower cost, the introductory version of the controls, because in then subsequent years, you don't have to add that much infrastructure. You can just add a gateway. You can just turn on a software license that you can deliver a ton of value for your building. And again, flip of a switch, a software license, if your infrastructure is already there. Next slide, please. So this one, not necessarily the product themselves, but they're the Bluetooth controls from Avion. The reason I wanted to call that out is more so propagating controls. What I was hearing a lot from different folks and the Avion folks themselves was different component manufacturers and control system manufacturers are partnering OEM in an OEM way with different fixture manufacturers to ensure that, hey, if you're a fixture manufacturer that has a solid product, good aesthetics, good heat control, but does not necessarily have connectivity or lighting control applications, there are many companies, Avion being just one of them, that will work with these lighting manufacturers to integrate their controls to the fixtures and then enable that connectivity and that network lighting control application. So I appreciate the more this happens on a business-to-business level, and you can offer that to market as a finished lighting and control system. Next slide, please, Shaun. I think just two more. SensorWorks, I like the system. I saw them, I don't quote me on this, but they started sometime in the 2010s, and they're, oh, I did skip one, sorry. Somehow my PowerPoint went ahead one more, but no, sorry, this is what they call the Light Architect from Cooper as well. And what I like about this is if you see the AR being capitalized there, they are leveraging augmented reality to have an application. You can see the outdoor application there where you can model the lighting in the space. You can grab your from your library of, it's a Cooper software, so your library of Cooper products. You take images or floor plans of an outdoor space, place the product in there, and you can see the red and the green there in the screen. Those are lighting levels and how the different fixtures can provide different foot candles in the different spaces there. And you can do a a pretty quick modeling. Like you don't need to go into AGI 32 and spend a week and putting together your space. You can get to a good enough estimate of light levels pretty quickly with that live application. So I thought it was pretty nifty. Next slide, please, Shaun. I think it's gonna be my last product one. That's what I was saying before. SensorWorks. They started sometime in the 2010s, and they're what we call a room-based system. So not mid-scale. It's not actually great for an entire building. It may be applicable for a floor, but more so a room-based system. And some of the things that stand out for them, they are manufactured in the United States. They started just having a wired system, and what I like about them is that they understood it's like, hey, like the future is wireless, especially when we're having these Bluetooth applications that can give you that 900-foot range. So this year they announced that they have a wireless solution or a hybrid wired and wireless application, and they mentioned they're going to continue expanding, adding app control and gateway in the future. So yeah, appreciate their system and how they're growing in the industry. And all right, Shaun, I want to tell us about some of the products that caught your eye on the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Armando. So Armando's gone through a lot of lighting controls and stuff like that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I will throw a few things out there. One, I'd mentioned earlier that one of the best ways to make use of some of these trade shows is to take a look at product that you don't typically get to see samples of, largely because they're difficult to ship, they're difficult for reps to carry around, things like that. So, for example, some of these decorative shapes that you see in the WAC booth here, right, and other booths like that, this really offers an opportunity to go and take a look at them, take a look at how are they constructed, what kind of materials are they, how do they perceive in real life, right? It's very difficult sometimes to get a sense of some of these things from just a catalog cut. I'd mentioned that before. So this is a really, really good way to make use of your time on the show floor. Now, those of you who know me have known that for years I've been an evangelist of the idea that we are going to see multiple color temperatures available from basically all light fixtures. That has slowed down a little bit based on this goofy virus that we've been dealing with, but ultimately, what we're finding in the industry is that if manufacturer X can have one SKU that they manufacture, they ship, they sell, they stock, that can cover multiple color temperatures for light fixtures, there's a benefit to them to do that, right? And of course, typically the way you wind up doing that is you have a warm channel and you have a cool channel. So you have a warm set of LED chips and then you have a cool set of LED chips. Or if you are more sophisticated, you might wind up using things like integrated Nichia chips, for example, that have a variety of different spectral characteristics right from the chip itself that are selectable. So even on very inexpensive product like this is a surface-mounted downlight from Prescolite. You'll notice on the back of that surface-mounted downlight from Prescolite, there is a switch selector that goes from 27K to 4000K, right? So you in the field can go ahead and select one color temperature versus another. Now, there will be some minor difference in light output. I think everybody here probably knows that the cooler LED chips are slightly more efficacious than the warmer chips, right? But that's such a relatively small difference now that this is becoming the norm. Now, some of you had been in a talk that I'd given a while ago in which I told you that probably by next year, most fixtures, like things like troffers, for example, would be shipped with color tuning. I think we're a little bit behind that right now, but not far off. And ultimately, we'll see some examples of why the discussion of circadian entrainment may be applicable with respect to some of that, although maybe not as applicable as some would have us believe. But like it or not, the fact is that most product that I'm seeing is in fact going to be user selectable, either from a switch system like this on the fixture itself, or through lighting controls and more advanced drivers, like for example, dolly drivers. So this was a manufacturer that I hadn't run into before, Solux, and clearly from Korea. One of the interesting things here, I mean, the light fixtures themselves, they're kind of all Me Too-ish, right? A lot of people make these shapes now. Pablo was I think the one that sort of first popularized this pendant disc shape. But if you'll notice in the far right on the upper side, you'll see some blue dots on the side of the light fixture. These guys are making integrated lighting controls into the light fixtures, so they have a certain amount of intelligence already built in. So what does that start to feel like? It starts to feel like what we keep calling luminaire level lighting controls, right? So the idea that you're going to be adding in a variety of different types of controls right into the light fixtures is really quite robust at this point. Lots of people are doing that. Now, the bigger question for some of these things is going to be, what is the front end? What is the communications? How does this all occur? And there's still some discussion within the industry because there's not enough standardization yet, but hopefully that will come. Another product that I actually really quite liked was from Bruck. So Bruck is a longtime company. They got their initial start doing, many of you will know, things like low voltage cable systems, right? Cable accent systems. The thing that really caught my eye from them this year was that they had this interesting catenary system. Catenary system, right, of course, is wires that you would typically string outside in a building and attach light fixtures to. Very common in Europe, not as common in the US. In fact, projects that we've tried to use them for in the past, it was very difficult to get any kind of catenary system except for big honking metal halide light fixtures like you'd find on streets and stuff. Here, Bruck has put together this really nice, and I apologize, it's a little bit challenging to see based on the configuration of the booth and all, but they had a really nice system here for catenary lighting, and I would encourage anybody who is a designer or architect and user to take a look at it and see if it was something useful for you. Another very interesting product. So we keep talking about daylight in buildings, right? And there's been this holy grail of making artificial daylight. And part of that artificial daylight holy grail has been the idea of the kinetic motion of the sun, right? So the idea would be that the sun traverses through the sky in certain patterns, and that leads to things like direct sun within buildings if you're not careful, or if you potentially want it. But it also leads to visual cues and things like skylights that might show you things like north skylight versus direct sunlight. So this product from Lidalite is one such effort of that, right? It has light sources up in the ceiling that will essentially project more or less the idea of a sun path through these recessed, effectively troffers, to try to convince the eye that you're seeing actual daylight and sunlight rather than light from a light fixture. I will tell you that from my perspective, it's a little bit gimmicky, but there are people out there who want to try these things. So I encourage people, if you want to experiment with it, go ahead. this is the interesting part of this is that this is now mainstreaming. There are several different manufacturers that do this kind of thing. About 10 years ago, one of my key clients, software company, had asked me to put together lighting very much like this. And at the time, the only player on the block was an Italian company, Celux, I think was what they called, COELUX, I think was their name. And ultimately, each one of these light fixtures was like $27,000. So we wound up not doing it. This is kind of the democratization or popularization of this kind of idea. So take a look, and if you do, let me know. I would be very curious to know how people feel about these installations when they're actually installed. Okay. I do want to throw out a quick heads up to some of the participants at LightFair who had not participated before and took this opportunity to join us. In particular, Seattle-based company Evluma, outdoor lighting with a variety of different types of light fixtures and controls options, was one of the companies that joined us. So well done, and thank you for being there. Another thing that caught my eye was the evolution of solar lighting, right? So years ago, there were a couple of companies that sort of initiated the idea of solar pathway or solar campus lighting. And the issue at that time was that battery storage and the panels themselves and the equipment were so cost prohibitive that the only places you'd really want to use solar lighting post hops like this were in those areas that were very far from the grid and would require a very, very significant cost for doing things like trenching wire and so forth. But there were a number of manufacturers there this time that were showing much more modestly priced and frankly much nicer looking solar lighting post tops, among other things. So not just Cobra heads, but in this particular case, post tops. So it might be worth at this point taking another look at whether solar lighting is appropriate for your projects, particularly even if you're not super far away from the grid, but if you are going to have trenching costs, take a look and see what's available out there. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about from a product standpoint was, oddly enough, a non-product. It's actually a protocol standard. So KNX is an open source protocol that has been used in Europe widely for many years. My recollection says this goes back more than 20 years. So it's building automation, both residential and commercial, controls lighting, but also can be used to control things like shades, exterior louvers, interior louvers, HVAC systems, other building materials. Like DALI, it was born in Europe, but it never really caught on as much here in the US. But it is now seeing new inroads, in part because it is an open source standard. And frankly, some of us are getting a little tired of the closed gardens that we have from each one of the lighting control manufacturers. And we're starting to really look for more opportunities for interconnectivity and the ability to have building systems talk to each other, right? Where would we be if 30 years ago the USB working group hadn't come together and given us the USB ports, right? We need some level of standardization. So take a look at KNX. You can hit the scan me here. There are several manufacturers in the US that are offering product for KNX stuff. And some of the stuff, actually, the digital bus, like the front end switches and things, some of the European standard stuff can actually work here as well, although you're going to want to pay attention to things like standard back boxes and things like that. But it's worth taking a look. So that's a pretty good overview of the show. right? What we saw from the standpoint of who is attending and the frankly phenomenal effort that the LightFair staff put together to pull this thing off again. Talked a little bit about our class, my hands-on network lighting class, and some of the classes that we took. A little bit about some of the things that we saw on the show floor, and then some key products. We're going to go through some final thoughts from both Armando and I at this point. And then I've answered some of the questions in the questions box, but if you have other questions, now would be an excellent time to go ahead and start writing them into the questions tab on your GoToWebinar interface so that we can address them pretty quickly after we've wrapped up our final thoughts here. So Armando, why don't you lead us off with your final thoughts?
Thank you, Shaun, and thank you for addressing those questions on the chat there. First thing that comes to my mind is the idea that this LightFair in the past couple ones, I haven't necessarily seen like a breakthrough paradigm shifting technology or product being revealed, but that's not to say that there isn't, or what I'm looking to say is we have a good amount of technological advances today that we have opportunities of improvement on how we implement them. And that's understanding the difference between knowing and actually following best practices. We know that today emergency fixtures can be controlled alongside normal fixtures, as Shaun showed us at the beginning. We know that a scope gray area that exists, such as developing an engraving scheduling, having both material and digital wall stations purposefully engraved. We know it's important to develop a sequence of operation, but knowing is half the battle. Actually implementing these concepts is the real win. And the more that we grow together as an industry and follow best practices, the more mainstream our different projects, systems, technological advances will be adopted. So a big ask here being, you guys pretty much know what a good quality project looks like and what it needs. So assign roles and responsibility early as to who's doing what. So there are no scope gray areas, and that is clearly defined what's supposed to happen. I know very well that projects can get extremely complicated and budgets and timelines get extended and things happen. But the more we can be evangelists and promoters of proper good practices, the better. Following along the lines is, as I mentioned with that wireless controls exterior study with PNNL and the other groups, standardizing on terminology and reporting is also going to be a key win for us in the industry. Like, yes, I understand competition and companies being able to differentiate and have their own brand and secret sauce. But if you're different end users, if facility managers or building owners, reps cannot speak the same language, they're saying, oh, it's either task tuning or high-end trim or the max dim or the dim ceiling. Again, there's going to be a good amount of potential for confusion. And the more that we can speak the same language across systems, across buildings, across companies, the better. Shaun was mentioning with KNX, one of the biggest growths we're seeing outside of light and health is that concept of interoperability among either devices, systems, buildings having different smart communication points. And Shaun did mention KNX. I stopped at the booth for the DALI and the DALI 2 Alliance, the D4I. They're another open protocol that's primarily based in Europe and looking to make waves in the United States. Similarly with Synapse Wireless, a company that enables wireless technologies and other products. So I'm seeing a lot of OEM work, a lot of interoperability with wired and wireless communication protocols. So we're going to have very, very smart, flexible, capable buildings in the very near future. And I do see lighting being a solid infrastructure for it. We do have that power in the ceiling. We have the smart devices in the ceiling, the sensors. so they can be leveraged for the next generation of technologies. Really appreciated the focus on decarbonized processes, sustainable processes, resilient product propagation, and the conversations around diversity, inclusion, equity, and respect. The more that we can work together with different mindsets, the better products and practices that we will come up with. And lastly, wearing the Seattle City Light hat, first and foremost, do projects right. To do projects, there is money on the table. I'll just call out at the bottom right of the Seattle City Lights incentive workbook. There's a lot of money, especially for what we call the luminaire level lighting control products. Those are your fixtures with the integrated motion and daylight sensors, load controllers. But per fixture, $75 per fixture on top of 15 cents a kilowatt hour for the LED savings and another 15 cents a kilowatt hour savings for controls. And if you don't have a luminaire level lighting control fixture, but you have multiple fixtures controlled by a network lighting control system, Seattle is providing $50 a fixture on top of all those 30 cent a kilowatt hour savings for LEDs and controls. So again, money on the table, engage with us and go after quality lighting projects. Back to you, Shaun, on your final thoughts.
Hey, Armando, thanks. There's a lot of good stuff to look at there. So I have a couple of things, and these are going to seem a little familiar because they're very much what my final thoughts were from October, because things haven't really changed, and it's kind of intentional that I left them as they were. So light and health, while we didn't see as many classes with respect to the latest research that say, folks like Bud Brainerd or Mariana Figueroa or Steve Lockley are doing, that research is ongoing and it will be presented. And I don't think there is much difference with respect to the public's desire to have better lighting that really works with our biology more effectively. Now, that may be slowed a little bit, in particular, given the fact that so many of us have been working from home for so long. But the reality is, ultimately, in some form or another, over time, we are coming back to the office. It's kind of going to happen. So I think that's kind of remaining an issue, and it's going to be an issue at home as well. Even if you're working from a home office, light and health is an issue. Lighting controls will continue to grow and continue to be more important, as will systems integration, right? It used to be very cutting edge or bleeding edge in some cases to try to integrate your systems into a unified whole, particularly into a GUI, right? To take inputs from one system into another system to actuate things like VAV boxes from your HVAC system based on occupancy sensors for your lighting system. That's not so uncommon anymore, and assume that more of that stuff is going to come pushing forward. And assume that the whole idea of tunable white, we saw the selector switch from Prescolite, assume that that's going to become standardized, right? That either you're going to have the ability to manually select based on those things for lower range product, and the higher range product, frankly, is going to have either DALI or some kind of digital driver that will allow color tuning, tunable white, or there'll be 0 to 10 versions of that, either 2 drivers or 1 driver that has multiple inputs. And we're going to continue to see things like the Internet of Things, right? The corporate America has not ceased to want to be hot mapping us when we will go into Target stores. And that's simply a fact, right? So these things are going to continue being more important, and you're going to see more and more of that at LightFair, right? Now, when we've sort of skirted around this a little bit with respect to light and health, I'm going to tell you once again from my perspective that depending on whose research you're talking about, the the color spectral characteristics of the light source are either more important or less important. The intensity of the light source is either more important or less important. The duration of the light source, how long you're exposed, is more or less important. Your timing is more or less important, right? You're going to see it in the morning, you're going to see it some other time. All of these things are the variables that are in play. Intensity of the light, right? How much light you have. The distribution of light, where is the light coming from? The spectral power distribution, what color is the light? What parts of the electromagnetic spectrum are represented within that light source, and how? The duration, how long are you being subjected to that light source? The timing, what time of day, and what is your photobiological history? In other words, for the last 5, 10 days, whatever it is, how much light have you had, and what has been your exposure to all of these other variables? So I'm going to hope that everybody who's on this call will realize that all but one of these variables is easily adjustable. How? By lighting controls. So lighting controls are important for aesthetics, they're important for flexibility of the spaces, they're important for not washing out projector screens in the Las Vegas Convention Center. They're also potentially very important for your human circadian system. Now, regardless of whose research is exactly correct, doesn't matter. What does matter, get the lighting controls in there, future-proof yourself so that you can adjust these variables accordingly as the research is finalized. I hope that all makes sense to people. And as part of that, how is this going to really manifest itself, right? Last time there was a presentation, that's what this image is from, was all about Dolly D4i drivers from Georgia Power. I believe this presentation was given again, which is why I kind of felt okay using this slide again. I didn't get a chance to see it. I was involved in other things at the time. But the question remains, what kind of interfaces are we going to be talking about, right? We saw the dip switch slider that was on the Prescolite, you know, the essentially residential grade product, and that's great, that's fantastic. But when we start to get into some of the more commercial grade product, we're likely to have more digital control, hopefully, maybe analog. We may have 0 to 10 volt control, but 0 to 10 is not a really great way to control lighting or building systems, particularly not in the age of digital communications, where we can put digital buses together that can do things like have significant repeatability and can have talkback between various devices for things like reporting for maintenance or reporting for energy use, whatever the things happen to be. So we had this same conversation in fluorescent days when we were talking about fluorescent dimming ballasts, where we had really as an industry pushed into the idea of digital controls, right? So that we could have all these things. Now, we're gonna push back into those conversations, I believe, and it's not really clear to me yet what's gonna win, if anything, but it is clear to me that the market is getting very frustrated. The market is an end user market, is getting very frustrated with the inability for the product manufacturers to be able to do seamless integration, at least on the commercial side. Because if you look at lighting for residential, a lot of that stuff's actually pretty well integrated into some of the home control systems. So people are starting to really notice that that there's not this kind of seamless integration, and we're going to see how that plays out in the next 5 years, I'd say. So those are my final thoughts. With all of that, Armando, do you want to have a final word, or do we want to go directly to questions?
I think it is a good time for questions, and I see a couple from Perry, so I appreciate you writing those in, Perry.
So Perry writes, solar commercial outdoor luminaires, temp install mobility needs seem to be a potential value. Outdoor areas with only time of year use or multiple sites with similar temporary needs. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at there. Armando?
Yeah, no, if I'm reading it correctly, more so not necessarily a question, just calling out the importance of solar outdoor luminaires. calling out, hey, big potential value. And Perry, to that end, I'll give you a quick comment. A month ago, pretty much, the resource conservation manager of the Seattle Parks and Recreation Department did reach out to our office asking for recommendations and on solar outdoor luminaires, looking to implement them and to normalize to solar powered outdoor cans. And I thought it was great, and I'll one up that concept. And now that I've been also working a little bit in the microgrid world, with those solar outdoor powered luminaires, that would be great if in the near future, the solar aspect not only ensures power and resiliency to the luminaire, but can also feed back power to the grid. Utilities, I'm sure, would be extremely interested in that application.
So I'm gonna jump in there too. That if you're looking at things like that, pay attention to upfront cost and life cycle cost with respect to some of that stuff. If you are close to the grid, it's probably not going to be that beneficial to you to do solar lighting. If you are distant from the grid and you have a lot of installation costs, it's going to pencil out much better than it used to. So take a look at some of those things. Interoperability is still a big barrier to innovation. Organizations with big facility portfolio with single facility maintenance crew, products specified, installed, often limited to big brands with longevity. So Perry, I agree that over time, interoperability is going to become much more important. Now, I will say that, we're talking about the lighting industry here, but it's not just the lighting industry that has this issue, right? HVAC control systems, fire alarms, security, everybody kind of wants their own closed garden. And that's understandable, right? You get to control for things like cybersecurity much easier. You get to control for warranty issues, for all those things, and that all makes sense, but it's not what people are expecting. So any manufacturers or reps on the phone, this is going to be an issue, right? This is, and it's already an issue, right? It's very frustrating to people. And I mean, I've spent an entire career trying to defeat the toggle switch at various points, and there are still people who would prefer a toggle switch because it's simple, right? It's simple, it's repeatable, it never has a problem. It doesn't save you anything, it doesn't really give you anything, but different people have different motivations. So I will say one thing. We see, particularly at LightFair, we always see a lot of either new manufacturers or incipient manufacturers that maybe been around for a little bit. I always caution people about two things. One, maybe three things. I don't want to stifle innovation, right? If somebody has the next best mousetrap, fantastic. I also want to be careful with my clients' dollars when I'm designing for them, because I don't want to buy that mousetrap and then have the company give me a lengthy warranty and then go out of business, right? Some of you may know the company Insteon. So Insteon was just the latest example of this. Insteon did predominantly residential building controls, right? So lighting, thermostats, things like that. They famously, a few months ago, with no warning, turned off their cloud-based servers, so all of the automation for all of those systems went dark. You could still turn the lights on, but any programming you'd done and any of that stuff was no longer available because their funding ran out. So you kind of have to balance the desire for the next best thing with making sure that the next best thing is going to be there in 10 years. So I hope that makes sense. Any other questions out there? We have a little bit of time. Perry has been fantastic about populating our questions area. Does anybody else have any questions that we might be able to talk about with respect to some of the things that we saw at LightFair, or some of the things that we expect are coming up in the industry in the next year or two? Anybody out there? I'm going to give you a little bit of time. While I'm giving you a little bit of time, I'm going to pop forward just a little bit here and say, next year we'll be at Javits Center, back at Javits in New York, and conference will be May 21 to May 23. So hope to see you there if you would like. Always fun to go to LightFair in New York, and Javits. The renovation of Javits was really nice. So they did a really, really good job of renovating the convention center. So take a look at it, and the new housing district around there, around that area, was actually really pretty cool to see some of that stuff going up, and it'll be nice to see when it's done. And not to forget, we will have upcoming events. We don't have them posted yet, but we usually take most of the summer off from events because, let's face it, we've got better things to do, all of us for Seattleites, in the summer when it's sunny out there. So let's go out and do that. But we will be starting up with live events in September. So go ahead and keep an eye on the web page for that, and we'll certainly be sending out emails letting everyone know. If you want to contact.
Wanted to interrupt, and apologies for the interruption. Just wanted to call out, if you had a moment here, Matt Daly wrote in about wireless mesh networks. We'll let you go on that.
We'll zing back into that for just a sec. Let's just finish this.
Perfect.
So if you want to contact me or Armando, these are our easy contacts. Or if you forget those, Lighting Design Lab at seattle.gov is an omnibus account, and it will get to us. And of course, thanks very much to Britton from the Smart Building Center. Don't forget that Smart Building Center has also a lot of lighting and non-lighting educational opportunities, as well as a fantastic bunch of hardware. Since we don't have a physical space anymore, it's a little bit more challenging, but not impossible, to borrow things like light meters and luminance meters and stuff from us. So the lending library that Britton has is something that everybody should know about. We are, of course, the Lighting Design Lab. We are powered by Seattle City Light, your favorite electric utility and mine. And if you leave before we finish answering all the questions, please take the online survey when you exit the webinar. We take those seriously, and in particular, if there are topics that you would like to see us cover in the fall or later, please go ahead and note that in there so that we know that. Now, let's circle back here. We still got time. I just wanted to kind of get through all that stuff before we did. So if you have other questions, Matt will get to you right now. But if you also have other questions, anybody out there, type them in now, and we will go ahead and do our best to answer them. So Matt, wireless mesh network lighting. Any insights or examples on systems that don't require an expensive, complicated gateway? So Matt, I'm going to ask you to elucidate on that a little bit, but we can talk a little bit about that. So interior or exterior, for example, and how far. Typically, networks will wind up having one of two configurations, right? They'll typically have either a star configuration, at which point you'll have a gateway, and then that will communicate to various devices around it, or you have a mesh network where each one of the parts and pieces is its own repeater, so that you'll talk device to device to device to device. Now, okay, so Matt, you are talking about exterior. I'm going to tell you, I'm less confident in what's available out there right now on exterior stuff. There are ways to do mesh networks in buildings, interior, that don't necessarily have to have a big expensive gateway, although expensive is a relative term these days. For exterior systems, I'm pretty sure that everybody I can think of is going to need to have some kind of hub, some kind of essentially black box that's going to communicate to device to device to device. Armando had shown you the device from McWong, right? So that Silver had been working on with McWong, which is predominantly an outdoor. So Bluetooth SIG is predominantly of use outdoors because of that 900-foot range, right? So that kind of controller is a mesh network, but it is going to have some device somewhere that is going to connect into either an internet kind of capability, or there's going to have to be some kind of controller and brains that are associated with it. So Armando, did you dig into that any further? And I mean, Echelon used to be out there, GE's out there now. The other place that I would look, Matt, is I would ping Ruth Taylor at Pacific Northwest National Labs. So Ruth is the person that's been behind for a number of years the next generation lighting competition that was being held in New York, and then that branched into the next generation lighting controls competition, looking at a variety of different LLC and networked lighting controls. And now she's also working with Ron Gibbons at Virginia Tech on looking at exterior lighting controls, in particular exterior sensors. But part of that is also the communications between them. So Armando, did you have something to add to that?
No, Shaun, more so what you said on McWong, and they do indeed have a gateway from the device, but you can only have one gateway rather than having to have multiple, because the device range will get you, again, miles of range. I do see a question from Matthew Ma asking if the Lighting Design Lab is going to have an open house this year. I'll briefly address that in saying we have been and will finish by the end of this year rebranding ourselves, and we are going to work on lighting topics, as well as we're going to evolve into building electrification topics. So stay tuned. We are planning an event for the end of this year, likely looking at around December 8th. So stay tuned, plug into our newsletter. You'll see more about us taking on additional topics beyond lighting and planning an event for the end of this year.
All right, but Matthew, it's not going to be the traditional kind of
that is correct
open house that we've had in the past. And part of that is that we don't have our physical space anymore. Okay, Matt, I ask because I'm dealing with an interior system where the area controller fails regularly and then nothing works. I don't want to repeat that in exterior lighting. Well, that's unfortunate. I'm not going to ask you who the manufacturer is, because that would be opening a bit of can of worms, but I'm sorry that you're having difficulty with a controller failing. It has not been my experience recently that that controllers fail anymore. I'm hoping it's not a new system. I'm hoping it's an older system where the electronics hadn't really been worked out yet. Yeah, like anything else, you're gonna need the brains. You're gonna need the communications gear. Sometimes that's even cellular communications, right? There are some systems that actually will make use of newer 5G cellular connections in order to essentially provide that gateway capability. So. All right, last chance, everybody. Thank you for the kind words. Those of you who are chiming in there, we appreciate it. We're glad to be able to help and be of service, but I'm going to give you one last chance. Questions. And if not, once again, please take the online survey so that we know how we can best help you, right? That's the whole goal here. How can we best help you? So, Britton, would you like to have the final word?
I just wanted to thank you, Shaun and Armando, for all the great information today, and once again for having us join. And thanks so much to everyone who attended and all the great engagement as well.
All right, that's a fantastic final word. Armando?
No, and thank you. Keep engaging with us, ask us questions, and we will grow together. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine in the afternoon.
Yes, you too.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.